no matter who he is, no matter what his personal opinions are regarding Israel, regarding Palestinians, regarding Jews, regarding the Bible, doesn't matter. Whoever becomes the US president is going to have to be an agent of trying to obstruct Israel's liberation. If we understand that, we could be free. We have to understand that no matter who becomes president of the United States, if I became president of the United States, I'm over 35, I was born in the US, I could theoretically run for president if I wanted to one day. If I became president of the United States, I would likely try to force Israel to surrender territory. I would likely try to make Israel more dependent on American power. And that's because when people become national leaders, they lose their free will. Chazal teaches that every nation has like a spiritual minister, a back end, right? Let's say if a nation is on the front end, there's like the code of the nation, right? There's a spiritual back end, a guardian angel. There's different language we can use to describe it. That is like the essential character of that nation. And Western civilization today is basically what our sages understand to be the fourth empire, right? All four empires are derivatives of Egypt, and all four empires try to replace us, try to stand in our place on the world stage, fill the role that's meant to be our role internationally, and to prevent us from fulfilling our mission in history. That's the function of all four empires. The first empire, Babylon, tries to prevent us from fulfilling our mission by removing us from our land. We're not in our land, we can't fulfill our task in history, our function in history. The second empire, Persia, tries to kill us, take the Jews out of the world. The third empire, Greece, tries to separate us from our Torah, which at the very least, separate us from relating to our Torah as divine. And the fourth empire, Edom, begins as the Romans and transforms throughout history, right? It becomes Christianity, it becomes Western civilization, but in the feudalist Christian sense. Then it transitions to Western civilization in the capitalist liberal sense, right? And today it's led by the United States. So and its function, its purpose, whether because it's the fourth of these empires that is meant to be an antagonist force in history that prevents Israel or tries to prevent Israel from fulfilling our mission and needs to be overcome by Israel. That's what it exists for. That's its role in the story. Whether because of that or because when Esav and Yaakov were in the womb of Rivka, she received a prophecy that they represent two different civilizations that will always be in conflict. And when one is up, the other is down. And when the other is up, the first is down. Like, meaning they can't be partners. They can't simultaneously be strong in the world stage. Then when anybody becomes president of the United States, they have to try to prevent Israel from becoming strong, from becoming independent, from being itself, from connecting to its true identity. It has to be. That's the function of the West, led by the United States, in the story. And if you learn how capitalism works, especially what we'll call monopoly capitalism and imperialism, then you understand it even clearer in geopolitical terms. And then you can see US interests in the region. And remember, if we're saying that every US leader, no matter who he is, no matter what his personal opinions are regarding Israel, regarding Palestinians, regarding Jews, regarding the Bible, doesn't matter, whoever becomes the US president is going to have to be an agent of trying to obstruct Israel's liberation, Israel's redemption. If we understand that, we could be free. We can say, okay, this is a situation, so let's try to free ourselves from their control as much as we can. And if we have to deal with them as two somewhat equal parties, not as empire and vassal, not as master and subordinate, but the way a lot of small countries who are weaker than us deal with the United States. If we're saying already that they're on the spiritual back ends, that's their function, that's their role in the story, then they can all have different conscious level reasons for believing this and for wanting to shrink Israel or make Israel more dependent on the United States, or to westernize Israel, make us more of a liberal Western type of society, or back those forces within Israeli society. For Donald Trump, the conscious level reason could be, I want to show that I'm the greatest US president and that I could do what everybody else failed at. Right? For Jimmy Carter, it could have been a real concern for Palestinians. For the Bushes and Clinton and Obama, it could have just been a perception of the United States' interest, the U.S. imperial interests in West Asia. Right? The conscious level reason could always be different, but what has to be is forcing a two-state solution on Israel, and part of the reason is because the Six-Day War is an event in the middle of the 20th century that defies the entire Western liberal perception of reality. It was a biblical style event. It was a miraculous event in the middle of the 20th century that showed the children of Israel came back to life against all odds. That something is changing, something is different. It threatens their world order. What we call Geulah, they call Armageddon. And the way to make that go away for them is to make the event historically irrelevant. And the way to make the event historically irrelevant is to take from us all the land we won, including especially the cradle of Jewish civilization. Now, until now, the Americans have succeeded in taking more peripheral territories away from us. The Sinai. We could have an argument whether or not Sinai is part of the land of Israel. Right? According to Rashi, it is. According to the Gaon of Vilna, it is. According to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, it is. According to Ibn Ezra, it is. But there's some opinions that it's not. Gaza. Gaza is definitely part of the land of Israel, but there have been people who argue it's not, based on the fact that, in a lot of, in Sefer Shoftim and maybe the beginning of Shmuel, or Shmuel Aleph at least, and maybe even the very beginning of Shmuel Bet, it seems to be a Philistine territory. But that doesn't mean it's not part of our land. But the West Bank, Samaria and Judea, especially Judea, is the cradle of Jewish civilization. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, Shiloh, Beit El, Shechem, right? Yericho. This is the cradle of Jewish civilization. That's the part that the Americans really want to take from us. And they haven't succeeded in doing that. And I hope they won't. But I believe Trump will try. And I believe that Trump is more capable, chas v'shalom, of taking it from us than Kamala Harris would be. If we start from the premise that all of them want to, if we start from the premise that anybody who becomes president of the United States, doesn't matter who, will try to impose a two-state solution on Israel, will try to divide our land, partition our land into two separate states, then we don't ask ourselves, who's the most pro-Israel president? Like, we don't try to support the most potentially pro-Israel president, the one who will use more pro-Israel language in their speeches. We actually want the candidate who will be the weaker US president. Because if every US president will try to take our land away from us, we want them to be weak. We don't want them to be strong. And it's even better for us if the rhetoric is not so pro-Israel, because that increases the chances and the speed at which we gain our internal independence, that we gain our internal liberation, that we free ourselves psychologically from a feeling of dependency on the forces of empire. That's important.